leadership last week that you know the time for action is now, and by that we need to look at ways to put increased pressure on North Korea in order for it to recognize the reality that it needs to pursue denuclearization, that it needs to answer the international community's very real concerns about its ongoing efforts to pursue nuclear weaponry and the means to deliver those in the region.
To follow up.
We're going to stay in North Korea, sure. Let's
on
let's
North
go
Korea
through all these
follow-up.
questions and then
Yes. North
kill this
Korea.
topic, sorry.
Thank you. The last time Secretary Tillerson said that the strategic patience is over and need a new approach to the North Korea. What is the United States new approach toward North Korea? What specifically included?
Well, good question. I think that, as I just said, provocations from North Korea have grown, frankly, too common, too dangerous to ignore anymore. So we're working with the international community, and that includes our partners in the region. Certainly, Republic of Korea, Japan are among those stalwart partners and allies who we're working with to address this concern. But we're looking at how we hold the Kim Jong-un regime accountable for its reckless behavior. And the way we're doing that is pursuing right now efforts to isolate, to cut off North Korea from the rest of the world. And that's being done through diplomatic efforts, but it's also through security and economic measures as well. All of this is with the aim of persuading North Korea that its pursuit of nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them is only going to take it farther from what it professes to want, which is a prosperous, engaged role in the world. Please.
Another one on North Korea. Said that it wanted an engaged role in the world.
Well, I think there's been lots of talk.
That North Korea wants to be.
Lots of discussion within the six-party talks that they want, sorry, I'm answering two questions at one time, that they want prosperity, that they want to be heard. That's what I'm talking about.
What do you mean by saying it's too dangerous to ignore anymore? Is this administration's position that the previous administration and the ones before it ignored North Korea?
I think it's no, but I would say that there's look, I think in the past several months, we have seen only an acceleration of North Korea's efforts to, as I said, to pursue nuclear weaponry, but also the means to deliver it. So I think there's a realization that the time for talk, the time for some of this, if I could put it in this kind of long-term negotiation strategy and engagement, is past.
Well, it's a crowd-pleasing line, isn't it, to say that, like, it's too dangerous to ignore anymore. But, like, it's one thing, as the Secretary has said, that the policy of, strategic patience or such has failed. But that doesn't mean that previous administrations, whether it's the Clinton administration, Bush administration, or Obama administration, ignored the problem. They just didn't deal with it in a way that has been able to abate it. Wouldn't you say?
I would say that
Are you saying that strategic patience is akin to ignoring North Korea?
No, and that's a fair point. What I would say is that we can no longer, I think, engage in that kind of longer range approach to North Korea, that we need short-term solutions. And, that's not to, look, the Secretary is also very clear, we're not looking for regime change here.
Well, do you
We're
need
looking at
short-term
denuclearization.
solutions, or do you need, I understand, it sounds like you're mixing your metaphors a little, because yes, you need, I understand what you're saying about not looking
We spokespeople do.
for a long-term, thinking about long-term negotiations, but a short-term solution is not going to deal with the North Korean problem in the long term. Like, don't you think? A short-term solution is a short-term solution.
Look, let me try
You
to.
don't want to curb the,
Right.
are you,
So-
that's just,
Okay, so there is an urgency to the situation that wasn't necessarily there in the past because of, the actions that they've taken over the past 6 months. And so I think that's been made very clear by Secretary Tillerson, by President Trump, and we've made that clear to the Chinese as well as our other allies and partners in the region.
President Trump said that if China is not help to resolve North Korean nuclear issues, the United States will take its own actions. What do you expect from China to do so?
Well, I think we expect China to obviously to assert its leverage that it has. I think just today I was talking about even though it's enacted all of the UN Security Council resolutions or UN Security Council sanctions rather regime against North Korea, it's also got a very robust trading program with North Korea. So clearly, it has economic influence over North Korea. We're looking at it to leverage its unique relationship with North Korea to persuade the regime in Pyongyang to reconsider. Yeah, let's
subject,
change
yeah.
subject.
Let's
Sorry,
finish this.
I'll get back
So-
to that time. I'll get back to that time.
There is an internal memo that went around, as well as something that was updated online, that even though the OMB lifted the hiring freeze, the federal hiring freeze, that the Secretary Tillerson, that the State Department is going to maintain its hiring freeze. Do you know what led to that decision?
Sure. So
And
OMB
what
on,
is it about?
okay. So the OMB on Wednesday announced the lifting of the hiring freeze, as you noted, and provided also extensive further guidance to all the various federal agencies on the implementation of and requirements pursuant to the OMB memorandum, which is called, I think, Comprehensive Plan for Reforming the Federal Government and Reducing the Federal Civilian Workforce, which is a mouthful, I apologize.
Yeah.
And this document, this memo, provides guidance on new requirements on the presidential memorandum that was initially issued on January 23rd. This is the one that issued the hiring freeze, as well as the executive order issued on March 13th that required a comprehensive plan to reorganize all the executive branch departments and agencies. So as part of that process, the department and the secretary are going to be undertaking a reorganization later in the year. And the decision was taken that the hiring freeze will continue until that plan is fully developed and agreement is reached on its implementation. And this is just part of prudent planning. We can't be onboarding people when we don't know what our reorganization is ultimately going to look like. But until then, and this is an important point, the secretary does retain authority to waive the hiring freeze and will do so in instances where national security interests and the department's core mission responsibilities require.
So
he
it doesn't break any federal law that he's done this?
It does not. It's his decision to
Even though
maintain this hiring
even though
freeze.
the Congress has, the appropriations has approved money for it, or even if the Congress has said that that's fine to lift it. So there is a law, a federal law that, that if appropriations has moved on some kind of spending or whatever,
Right.
and he says, no, I'm not going to touch that, isn't that against a law?
My understanding is that he has the jurisdiction to basically to keep this freeze in place as we go about this presidentially mandated
Are we talking
reorganization
about civil and foreign service officers, political appointees?
across the board.
So wait a minute. So he's not going to hire any political appointees before the reorg?
I believe it's a hiring freeze across the board.
Could
I
you
don't know about
check
political
on that?
appointees.
So
I'll
what do you?
check on that.
Yeah,
can check
I
on
mean,
that.
that would essentially, if that's true, what you're saying, that there's a hiring freeze across the board, that you would not be
I would
hiring
check on
any
political
assistant
appointments. I'm not sure
secretaries,
about political appointments.
undersecretaries,
Yeah,
a
I'm
deputy
not sure about
secretary of
political
state.
appointments.
That can't be right.
Yeah. I'll
So,
check on that.
effectively, he's put this on the freeze until he's done the reorganization. Have those plans actually started, and how are they going to be fleshed out as?
I believe they have started. As to how they're going to be fleshed out, I don't have any more details.
It's going to go on for the rest of the year?
I don't know if there's a time, date. I don't have any kind of time frame for you. If I can
And
get that, I'll let
I
you know.
gather that he would have got White House or congressional approval for this?
Yes, I would imagine he
I
would.
just want to point out
On
something
the
that.
political appointees, that's a good question.
Yeah, no, because, I mean, Foreign Minister Lavrov even said yesterday that, I mean, and I mean, we can consider the source, but other diplomats from other.
No, I'm not responding, I'm just,
I understand, but other diplomats from other countries have also said that the lack of staff at the State Department has become a impediment to having interlocutors to deal with whether it's long-term foreign policy cooperation, short-term foreign policy crises. So, I mean, I would really like some clarification on that, because if you're saying that there's a hiring freeze across the board, I really would say that suggests that that would continue to be a problem.
it's a fair question.
Related to this, though, Mark, you said that he has he retains authority to
Yeah,
waive
authority,
it,
thank you.
right?
Yes, he does, yeah. In instances where national security interests and department's core mission responsibilities, I would assume that political appointees in
you
high
think- you
positions
think
would
that would
fall under
apply
the
to
department's
the-
core mission
Do you
responsibilities.
think that would apply to the newly nominated deputy?
I would.
You think he'd
that
get a
would
waiver?
apply.
So, hold on a second, I'm not done
Yeah,
yet.
yeah.
Back in February, 2 months ago tomorrow, the department sought and received a waiver from what was then the hiring freeze. You were given permission by OMB to bring on 175 new staff, 70 entry-level, 80 mid-level, and 25 consular fellows. Did those people actually come on board? And did the department seek additional exemptions between February 14th and
I'll check on both.
Wednesday?
Yeah, I'll check on both. I'll take those questions. Yeah, we can change the subject, but I haven't gotten this, I'll get back to you, I swear to gosh.
Regarding Venezuela,
Sure.
thousands of protesters are demanding new elections in Venezuela. And opposition leaders consider that the government of the President Nicolas Maduro is no longer respecting democratic institutions and it's sliding toward authoritarian practices. Could you comment on that, please?
Sure. First of all, I want to start with some of the reports of violence against protesters during demonstrations in Venezuela. We're aware of those reports. We obviously regret any loss of life. We call once again on the government of Venezuela to conduct full, fair, and transparent investigations into this violence. We also call on the government and security forces to respect the freedom of assembly, peaceful assembly, as a universal human right, which the Venezuelan authorities should respect. We, as I said, also urge the demonstrators to express themselves nonviolently. With respect to your broader question, we urge the Maduro government to reconsider its decision this past week, I believe, past weekend, to bar Miranda State Governor Enrique Capriles and from participating in the country's public life for, I think, some 15 years. It's something we view with grave concern. It's absolutely vital that Venezuelans have the right to exercise their and elect their representatives in free and fair elections in accordance with the Venezuelan Constitution and consistent with international instruments, and that includes the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We firmly support as well the consensus of the Organization of American States Permanent Council, which affirms it is essential that the government of Venezuela ensure the full restoration of democratic order. Thanks. Please.
Yes. You mentioned the need to work with South Korea and Japan on
Yes.
North Korea. And Vice President Pence is about to travel to that region
Yep.
and will be visiting both South Korea and Japan. I was wondering if you could discuss what message he'll be sending to leaders in the region and what he'll be discussing in those meetings. And
Well,
then I have
look,
a follow-up.
I would have to refer you to the Vice President and his office to talk about the specifics about his trip. But obviously, I think that it's very clear, given Secretary Tillerson's travel to the region, given that both leadership from Republic of Korea and Japan have been here for high-level meetings, that we are very concerned, primarily concerned with North Korea and its actions and how to deal with North Korea. And in that regard, I think he's going to be sending a very clear message, certainly in Seoul and elsewhere, of our steadfast, ironclad support for our allies and partners in the region. And that stands absolute. So I'll leave it to him to speak in greater detail.
And then also
Yeah,
in
so
Japan,
Couple
he'll.
questions about Syria.
Of course.
So, Foreign Minister Lavrov talked about, he offered to reinstate this deconfliction channel, but there were terms, and I was wondering, this thing about the deconfliction in the air between airplanes, and that was suspended. Secretary Tillerson didn't say anything about whether he accepted the terms that Lavrov set. So we're wondering, where does that stand? How important is that channel, and what's the plan when it comes to preventing any mishaps in the air over Syria?
Frankly, my understanding was that does remain intact. There was some question that it was going to be pulled down. That was a Russian claim, at least. Look, we consider that deconfliction channel to be very important because it helps ensure that neither our pilots nor Russia's pilots are unduly or unnecessarily put in harm's way when we're carrying out military missions in that region. So, I can't speak to how it may change. My understanding is that it does remain in effect.
Because, my understanding is that channel was suspended after the missile strike.
I had heard that, I had seen those same reports, but my understanding was that after that it was reinstated. If that's incorrect, I'll let you know.
I have a
Fact
follow-up
check.
question.
Of course, finish up.
Yeah, so did Secretary Tillerson meet with any members of civil society while he was in Moscow or in Russia?
I don't believe he did. Frankly, it was an issue of time. He did, of course, raise our concerns, as he does in every meeting with our Russian counterparts. But I don't believe he actually had the time to meet with any members of civil society while he was on the ground.
Just to follow up on that, and then I have a question on Afghanistan. Do you anticipate this is something that he'll make as a kind of regular feature of his travel? I mean, past secretaries, to some extent, some more, some less, have made that a kind of staple of their.
Meeting with civil society members?
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, it has been, because it's a great way to send the message that, it's a matter of concern, it's an issue of concern to us. Again, I think in any given visit, given the other demands on Secretary's schedule, of course, I can't speak categorically, but I know for a fact that he does consider human rights, healthy civil society to be something that he's going to press in all of his interactions.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If we could just
Ma'am.
go back to Afghanistan for a second.
sure.
I know you kind of punted to the Pentagon on the actual strike itself, but we haven't really heard a lot about ISIS in the kind of Afghan-Pakistan region. And I'm wondering if you could kind of bring us up to date on, your discussions with those governments about the growth of ISIS. Because like I said, we really haven't. I know that they've, had some small presence, but it kind of was surprising to see the depth of which
Right.
which you had the.
Well,
this concern.
and it's a fair point to bring up. I mean, look, we've been very clear that, just like we've seen elsewhere in the world, but certainly in Afghanistan, where ISIS has attempted to co-opt some existing groups on the ground in an effort to, create affiliates. And we're going to see this, I think, and this is something that was discussed in the ministerial a few weeks ago, that as ISIS continues to get pressed in Syria and Iraq, it's going to seek to do that, I think, more and more. So it's something we're watching very closely, and we're working with the government of Afghanistan and our partners in the region in order to deny any terrorist organization, that includes Al-Qaeda as well, safe haven or any kind of material support on the ground. And as we've also been very clear, when we see targets of opportunity and leadership opportunities to take out key leadership, we're going to take those opportunities.
I understand that this was a target of opportunity, but are you saying that this target was, were they working with other types of like so-called affiliates?
That's a common practice for ISIS.
No, I understand, but I'm
yeah.
just saying.
I don't
this
know the
particular-
specifics. I don't have enough specifics on
I'm
this.
just, as opposed
Yeah.
to like the actual strike and the weapon and how it was done, I'm interested in this particular target and
Right.
why it was chosen in terms of their, threat. And given that the State Department has really been the lead in terms of, the coalition against ISIS, I'd be interested a little bit more in.
Sure, I don't have a lot of detail on this particular strike and why this, I mean, other than that they were ISIS-affiliated group.
ISIS
or
affiliated group
ISIS.
or members of ISIS, like
I'll check.
official leadership?
check.
Thank you.
Yep. Couple more questions, guys. T-Gender, I haven't gotten to you yet.
I've had a lot of patience, and wishing you a quick, fast
Oh, thanks.
recovery because I
Thank
saw you limping. It's
I'm limping, I'm coughing.
oh
I need
yes,
vacation. Luckily, it's coming up.
yeah. I have empathy. I'm coughing also.
Yeah.
The one short follow up on Afghanistan and then one on India related. Afghanistan is that day before yesterday after the briefing in the Pentagon, the defense secretary, when I asked him that is Afghanistan on back burner, he said not at all. Nothing has changed. So that's from the defense on the
What he said,
on,
yes.
on the diplomatic side, with the Russia taking that initiative. Has anything changed from this side on the diplomatic front?
Not at all. And in fact, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, the Afghan foreign minister, I think it was in conjunction with the counter-ISIS ministerial, was here in town, and they had a very good bilateral discussion. It was one of the few bilateral meetings he was able to take, given his schedule, Secretary Tillerson's schedule. But he made the point of taking that meeting because he wanted to express our firm support for the Afghan government's continued efforts to confront the Taliban, to confront other terrorist groups on its territory, and to solidify and continue to enact needed political and economic reforms.
And the other
You
one,
had another one? Yep, finish up.
I have a
And then
second one. The second one is
I'm gonna
about
do three more questions, Jimmy. I
yeah.
got to you.
The
I got
second-
to you already.
The second
Three more
one is
questions.
the second one
Please.
is about the diplomatic efforts from the U.S. The Indian media is flush with this hate crimes against people of Indian origin. Now, what the kind of journalistic investigation revealed that most of these Indians were either misidentified or misunderstood because of religious symbols or other things. But when the Indian ambassador rushes to State Department and expresses his deep concerns about this, and then we find out that the Hardish Patel, the county sheriff, says that it was not a hate crime. So, how can you clarify that these incidents are not against Indians or people from Indian origin? They're misidentified. It's not about condoning hate crime. It's about misrepresenting the facts. If you can clarify from this podium.
So, a couple of thoughts on this. First of all is, we obviously strongly condemn any hate crime, any crime carried out against someone based on their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, whatever. We condemn it. Secondly, though, with respect to these particular crimes, that's really something for either local, regional, or federal law enforcement to speak to. All of these crimes need to be thoroughly investigated, and that's why I'm very hesitant to comment on one particular case or not, because I don't know the facts, and it would be imprudent for me, except to say that, largely speaking, there's a strong Indian American community in this country. They're a vibrant part of American culture and society and the economy here. And we as Americans welcome their contribution. As I said, any crime based on that potentially based on someone's ethnicity or heritage should be heartily condemned.
I was trying to clarify one second.
Sure, sure.
I was just trying to clarify that these crimes were even ethnicity based, were not against the Indian ethnicity. They were
Identify. I just don't have the details. I apologize, Chief General.
Really quick
Said,
question
very
on
quick.
the
Yep.
Palestinian
Yep.
Israeli issue. A couple of days ago, you issued an advisory, a travel advisory
Yep.
to Israel, the West Bank, and Gaza. but you also urged American citizens to leave Gaza.
Yep.
And this coincided, with the escalating tensions, and the Israelis are amassing troops. Are you concerned that there may be another war that?
No, sure. I'm
Would
aware.
you urge the Israelis?
I'm aware the
not-
timing was linked or was close to, but this was, as my understanding, just a periodic update, and that the information concerning Gaza was similar to language from our previous travel warnings. So, as many of you know in this room, we have to periodically update the language to ensure they remain valid and up to date. This was a routine update. I think the previous one was issued on August 23rd, 2016, but it contained very similar guidance. Our travel warning warns U.S. citizens against all travel to the Gaza Strip and urges those present to depart as soon as possible when border crossings are open. And I think, by way of explanation, given the security conditions in Gaza, U.S. government personnel have been long restricted from travel to Gaza, and so that restricts our ability to provide any assistance or support to any U.S. citizen in Gaza. So it's out of that reality, if you will, that we caution. Yep.
And this,
And then John, last question.
yeah, and this Russia-hosted conference in Afghanistan, you said that
Yes,
it
sir.
seemed to be a unilateral Russian attempt to assert influence in the region. This dropping of this massive bomb in Afghanistan that has a fairly large optical element to it, could one interpret that as a unilateral attempt to assert influence? in the region?
Look, I'm not going to attempt to speak way outside my box and talk about military matters.
But
I
it does
leave
have,
that
when
to
it's a bomb that large, there's a diplomatic effect to dropping something like that.
There is, John, but I imagine, but I'm going to stay mum on that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much.